My name is Craig Semple. I'm a former police detective in the New South Wales Police Force. 25-year career I had in the police force. I was medically retired about 6 years ago as a result of post-traumatic stress disorder and also major depressive disorder.
Human beings seem to have this fundamental survival mechanism that's hardwired into us that gets activated when we come under extraordinary threat, and that can get damaged. And when that gets damaged, we believe that it becomes post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress injury.
Well, it was probably about 8 years before I actually had my final breakdown, which led to my exit from the police force. I started having really bad nightmares after a particularly bad homicide. And that was the first warning sign for me that something wasn't right. And back in those days, we had a bit of a, historically speaking, we had a bit of a culture in the police force that you sort of lock these things up and you try just to punch on and just battle your way through them without speaking up about them. I became very emotionally numb. I didn't feel plugged in to the world around me. Sometimes I just felt like I was going crazy. I couldn't experience normal, nice human feelings like love and happiness and all that sort of thing. I could really tap into anger and aggression really well. But all those real positive feelings, they sort of deserted me. With my work, I became quite manic in the way I used my work as a coping strategy. So I really got a big hit from the adrenaline that I was able to tap into with the drug work that I was doing, the homicides and the bikie gang investigations, that it gave me a real stimulation after having bad nights of sleep. And I became really manic in the way that I was setting really almost unachievable goals with a lot of the investigations that I was running, and I was really pushing the boundaries of what I could actually cope with stress.
Get help early. Don't push on. Those pushing on, pushing through, sucking it up, toughing it out, those strategies are great to prevent injury, but they're really bad at healing injury.
I knew that I'd lost control of my situation. Things had got so bad, my mood had plummeted so quickly that all the strategies that I used to use to try and lift my mood and deal with what I had going on in secret, they ceased to work anymore. And it was at that point that I realised that I'd lost control of the situation. I needed someone to help me and help me fast. So I went and saw a psychologist who was a really good fit and had a lot of experience of trauma. And it was only the next day I was telling my wife about that experience, and I had a complete breakdown in the kitchen, and I never went back to work again after that day. So my recovery journey was, in essence, a 5-year recovery, and the first 3 years were the hardest because I was dealing with not only post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the illness I had first, the injury that I had first, but because I didn't get help for that injury when I should have, I ended up with major depressive disorder as a result of being burnt out. So I was battling two illnesses at the same time.
There's no immunity that we have yet to prevent PTSD. The strongest predictor of somebody developing PTSD is the amount of trauma they've experienced, and the severity of it. And it could have happened any time. The more trauma you've experienced across your lifetime or in your workplace, the more likely that injury is to happen. So you're not to blame for it. It's an injury, it's treatable, and we want to get you well. Now, trauma memories tend to be overgeneralized. They tend to lack specificity. So they're basically unstored and they keep repeating on you. So there's unfinished business. Now, the trauma treatments, all of them try to complete that process. Prolonged exposure therapy begins by, now it may sound ridiculous to take you back to the very thing that you're being, assaulted by all the time, but actually it completes the memory storage process. And if we can complete that memory storage process, a lot of the symptoms seem to stop. And it's remarkable. I've seen people approach memories that they've never been able to talk about without an enormous emotional distress and becoming completely overwhelmed. And after this treatment, you can talk about it. And of course, it's never a good memory, but it doesn't fire up the PTSD response, and that's what's critical. So, often a therapist will do eye movements with you, which seems to help the processing and stops you blocking some of the material.
But I think it's reasonable to think about what getting better is likely to look like or feel like. Mental illness, be it depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder, doesn't tend to disappear overnight. It will be a gradual process. But what you should expect is that once you're engaging with treatment, you begin to notice a gradual rolling back of some of the symptoms. Once we have you on an effective treatment, we would normally expect to see some benefits within the first 3 to 4 weeks.
The recovery journey for me involved a whole range of different strategies, including 3 months of treatment at a trauma clinic at Westmead Hospital, where I did things such as imaginal reliving through exposure therapy. And then we went through, I learnt techniques in cognitive behaviour therapy, which is all about challenging negative thinking. I learnt strategies about mindfulness, learning meditation techniques.
The role of an exercise physiologist there is to provide evidence-based, individualised exercise programs to maximise someone's chance of recovery, improve their physical health and their mental health simultaneously. When we talk about the benefits of exercise, there's both long-term benefits that happen over a period of time, so let's say 12 weeks plus, but there's also benefits that can happen following one single session. So for example, we know that if you manage to get up out of bed and go for a walk or go for a run, that we can sometimes feel that immediate benefit where we feel that runner's high that people talk about. Really the aim of seeing an exercise physiologist is to maximise both those short-term and long-term benefits that you can get from engaging in an appropriate, sustainable exercise program.
Progress with my post-traumatic stress disorder was complicated by the fact the symptoms of depression would sometimes hold me back. I was introduced to yoga as a way, because exercise is really, really important as part of recovery, and so is mindfulness, and yoga is sort of a combination of the two. What really saw me recover to the point that I am now was simply the fact that I eventually got a recovery game plan in place, and it was all goal orientated, and all the goals that I set myself for that recovery were all what I call achievable goals. So I was making sure I didn't set myself up for failure. When I was initially in a real bad crisis when I left work for the first time, and at some point in that process I had to make a decision whether I was going to go back to the police force. And imagine if I left work and never went back to it, then a lot of these problems might just go away. And then when I actually did leave, I was actually setting myself up for failure with that, because the relief that I expected to get once I left work, it wasn't there. It was actually replaced by something else, which was an extreme grief for the loss of a career that I loved, and my identity as well as a cop. So it's really, really important to know that whatever relief you expect to get from maybe looking at a discharge or leaving the workplace, it might actually be replaced by something worse.
For many, many years, we've been trying to understand post-traumatic stress disorder. There's already 30,000 research papers that have been published on it, and it's still something we're learning a lot about over time. We're still trying to improve our treatments. So we're learning all the time. Our treatments are improving all the time, and we're working to try to find ways to ensure people get better and they've got a positive, productive future ahead of them. Even if they don't return to the same workplace, we want you to have a positive outcome.
For me, being recovered is more about just getting back to a position where you can deal with the normal stresses of everyday life. You can work again and give commitment to your community. So much better as a person now than what I was when I left the police force. That occupation gave me a huge sense of purpose, okay? And then when I left it, I had no sense of purpose anymore. That affects your sense of worth. And when I started doing volunteer work a couple of years down the track after my discharge, doing that really important work for the Black Dog Institute and going out and using my experience with these illnesses to try and benefit other people, then I got that sense of purpose back again, and that really lifted my self-esteem.
My first 4 tips, the most important thing is don't lose hope and don't give up. You've got to work at recovery. I think the second thing is don't turn to harmful strategies, that might give you a quick fix but aren't building a positive future. So here I'm talking about drugs, alcohol, isolation, staying at home all day, just letting your whole world shrink down to this. You've got to push out and reach out. Third, find a good treatment team. And what do I mean by a good treatment team? Well, firstly, people that you trust and work with. Secondly, people that are experienced in managing this condition. Third, people that use evidence-based treatment. And the fourth, key tip is you've got to work at it. You're the one that's going to build your recovery. You've got to invest time in it. So it requires you working at it. If it doesn't work the first time, find another treatment team, find other people you trust and keep working at it. People who get better are those people who keep working at it, don't give up. It can take a bit of time, especially if a lot of other conditions have developed over time, but the more you work at it, the more your recovery will build.